Have you ever had a problematic neighbor? You know, one who watches TV at full volume at night, or who leaves stuff at the stairs landing? Ugh, anyone can end up having to deal with someone so undesirable. And I would know, since I had to live with a murderer. It was many years ago. I got my first job and moved out of my parents' house to a small apartment in the suburbs. I couldn't afford something bigger, but I was still pretty happy since I no longer depended on anyone else. It was also a pretty quiet neighborhood, and the house had only 2 apartments. Mine was the attic, and the owner of the house lived in the first floor. A 40-year-old man who wasn't very sociable, but was pretty polite. I thought that since he was so serious and solitary, I wouldn't have any issue with him as a neighbor, so I closed the deal. He asked me if I was a light sleeper, due to the thickness of the walls. But no, I usually sleep like a rock, and he would need an earthquake to wake me up. Now, you know when they interview the neighbors of a criminal in the news? They always say the same thing, that he or she seemed like a normal person, and that they didn't suspect anything. Because it's not like a killer will wake you up in the middle of the night to ask you for a knife, right? In my case, I did see some weird stuff, but I never imagined it would be something like that. As I said before, my neighbor wasn't very sociable, and would barely greet me when we crossed paths in the morning. However, he had a pretty active nightlife. I would always hear him arrive to his apartment pretty late, just when I was about to go to bed. And he would sometimes arrive with different women, because I could distinguish their voices. I felt envious at first. What a womanizer. A different one every week. In the morning, I would try to bump into him to see if I could meet the girl he brought the night before. But he would always leave alone and in a rush, so I never had the chance to ask him. Over time, I started to think maybe that I was wrong, and he was always bringing the same woman. Maybe his girlfriend? However, for an entire year of living there, I never bumped into another woman. I would sometimes hear a voice louder than the other, and even some screams, but I would just assume they were drunk. And as I told you, I'm a heavy sleeper. I only complained to him one time, and every time I remember that, my blood runs cold. That time, when he opened the door, he looked pretty unkempt, disheveled, with his shirt open and with a scratch on his face. Wow, he had a wild night, I thought. I asked him to please lower the volume, when I suddenly heard a murmur, followed by a dry thud against the wall. He told me that his companion was dizzy and wasn't doing very well. I didn't want to insist anymore, and so I said bye. I was so sleepy that I didn't give any importance to that situation. And now, I realize what was happening, and think that maybe I could have saved that poor woman. Or on the contrary, I could have ended up dead too. However, I never imagined that those atrocities could be happening a few meters below me, while I slept peacefully on my bed. Over time, I also understood how he disposed of his victims. There was a basement that I wasn't allowed to access, which he said he used to store old stuff. One day I had to leave very early in the morning because my father had been hospitalized. And when I crossed the entrance, I noticed a horrible stink coming from below. At the base of the stairs, I could see the basement open, and the light of the light bulb illuminated a huge garbage bag filled to the brim. I couldn't stop to investigate though. My family was waiting for me. The next day I bumped into him, so I asked him about the garbage bag, and he told me that a big freezer he had in the basement broke, so he had to throw away a lot of rotten meat. He always had an excuse for everything, but I started to get more and more suspicious. And when I saw the disappearance of those women in the news, chills ran through my entire body. I thought about going to the police, but what could I tell them? Fortunately, that didn't last long. A few days later, agents came to the house to arrest him. They asked me hundreds of questions, and I told them all the weird things I noticed. I was feeling guilty for not calling the police before, but they still tried to calm me down. I really had no evidence of anything. A reporter also came to interview me, so I told him the first thing that came to mind. He looked like a pretty normal person. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you on the next episode.